Hello there. I'm Carolyn Rosenblatt, RN and attorney at agingparents.com. Welcome to our channel. Today, I'd like to focus on what you can do if you've got parents who are of retirement age and nobody has ever talked about what their future might look like. And that's most people. So don't be surprised if you're in that situation because you're not alone. But I think it's really helpful in the position that I'm in with advising families to really think about what can happen over the years. Your parents might be perfectly fine right now, but 10 years from now, 20 years from now, everything might not be so perfect. So here at agingparents.com, we have created a Help Aging Parents checklist. And I'm going to go through it right now. It's 10 points. And each one of those things is something to think about and consider doing for yourself. Because as parents get older, you don't want to be unprepared and freaked out and stressed out unnecessarily. It's hard enough when your aging loved ones get older and start to lose their independence. You don't need to have shocks and surprises that you've never even considered to make things harder. So the first thing is that your parents have to decide who they want to talk to about the future. Maybe they don't trust you. Maybe they don't like your brother. Maybe they've had some bad experiences with someone. There's got to be someone that they relate to and that they trust. And that you've got to sit down and start having a conversation with them about the future. And you plan it at a time that's convenient when they're in a good place. And you want to talk about what they want and what you want for the future. That's a good starting point, talking about what you want. Well, I want to stay home as long as possible. I'm not going to have anything go wrong. Don't worry about it. There's more to this conversation, so you got to encourage it. All right, so one of the very first things everybody needs to have is a signed, durable power of attorney. That's for finances. That helps you help them if they get bonked in the head or they get dementia or they have a stroke, then they can't make decisions about money. If you don't have that piece of paper, you can't go to the bank and take out money to pay their mortgage or their bills or whatever. So it's an essential thing. When people do estate planning with a lawyer, that's part of the package. They get their will or their trust or both of those, power of attorney and a healthcare directive. But the power of attorney needs to be notarized. So make sure it's current. Make sure the person they've appointed is still around. Make sure it's not their 95-year-old best buddy who's daft and can't help them anymore. Make sure it's somebody who's around that can be useful because this comes up a lot. All right, so again, the financial part of the picture is only one part, and there is the healthcare part too, and that's also very important because healthcare decisions have to be made by the person who's being dealt with by the medical establishment, but if they can't make those decisions because they're unconscious or they really can't understand what's going on or they've had a head injury or a stroke or, again, they have dementia, they don't know what's going on maybe. So a person who is appointed that healthcare agent has the power to make those decisions on behalf of the impaired person, your parent, your grandparent. And I think it's really also important to pick somebody who can be a good advocate, because the healthcare system's kind of broken and a lot of decisions are made because the doctors don't have anybody else objecting to them. So it's important that the person who is appointed as the agent for healthcare decisions has the foresight to look ahead at what might happen and the wherewithal to be able to speak up. Advocacy is a really critical piece of being a healthcare agent. Okay. So we've got to talk about money with aging parents. If we don't do that, everybody's in trouble because healthcare at home costs money. Medicare doesn't cover home care. And a lot of people need it, even a little bit at a time or maybe a lot. But you've got to get their bank accounts, their passwords, the backup to their computer stored information, investment records, financial planning that they've done. And you've got to be able to be in communication with their estate planning attorney if they have one, or their financial advisor if they have one, both of those. Neither of those professionals who have licenses can talk to you without your parents' permission. And it can be a simple letter that say, I give my daughter so-and-so the right to speak with you when necessary if I become impaired. That'll do. then they are okay. They're off the hook for their confidentiality requirements. The same with lawyers. We can't just chat with anybody who calls up and wants to know about a client. So that's a very important step, and it will help you a lot if your parents start to decline cognitively and can't think straight anymore. If they're out of it, you're going to need those people that they've worked with in the past. Okay, so then you've got to start making lists. And when you speak with your parents, this is not something that's going to happen all at once, but the lists would include their insurance policies, mortgage statement or statements, if any, their life insurance, disability insurance, any other kind of insurance, long-term care insurance if they happen to have that, their property, earthquake insurance, everything like that, because those all have to be renewed. And if they are forgetful, they're not going to be able to do that themselves, which is dangerous. Things get canceled, and it's a nightmare for the family when a parent has failed to pay the bill on something and then they actually need to cash in on those benefits. All right, so the one they've appointed as the power of attorney, what we call the agent or the attorney in fact, that is the person who actually has to have all that information. Without it, you can be appointed and you can't do anything because you don't know where to find anything. So this is just a cautionary warning to you. So you want to make copies of their statements, like the mortgage statement, other loans they have, debts they have. If they've gone a little crazy with the credit cards, you got to know how much debt they have. The power of attorney should have all that too. Okay? Now let's talk about the medical, because the medical piece is important. A lot of elders have multiple chronic health conditions. So they have a neurologist, they have an orthopedist, they have an internist, and so on. And you don't know who all these people are because their health care has been their business, unless they happen to share a lot with you. But it's really important when you have these sitting down together meetings to ask your parents to give you the okay to get a list of who the doctors are, because if they suddenly have an accident, like a fall, which a lot of people do have as they get older, and they're out of it for a while or for good, you have to know who has been treating them and what medications they're taking and how to get the medical records. The healthcare agent who's appointed on that document, we call a healthcare directive or a healthcare proxy or a power of attorney for healthcare, whatever you call it, built into that document is the written permission to get records and talk to doctors. So be sure that you have that for your aging parents, because if you need that information and you can't get it because there's no paperwork, it's a mess. You don't need that stress when the time comes. All right. Now, their wishes for their end of life are very important for you to understand. That's on the healthcare directive. But after they pass, you've got to know whether they had made a provision for burial or other disposition of their remains. Somebody's got to be in charge. It's typically family. So if you don't know what they wanted, it's going to be up to you to make a decision without any information, and that's really hard. So ask them. That's not such a hard question. Do you want to be buried? Do you want to be cremated? What do you want to have happen? And write it down. Maybe they've already bought a plot or something like that. But that's also critical information on the checklist. Okay. Now, I think that since a lot of people have estate plans and they have done this work with an estate planning attorney years ago, laws change. The estate planning attorney might not be here anymore. Or maybe they've moved to be closer to you, or something else has happened to change their location with regard to an attorney. And ask them when is the last time they updated their will and trust. If they tell you, well, it's been 30 years, it's time to get it looked at by somebody. It's not so expensive to have it reviewed by a competent, experienced, not your best friend's uncle's cousin's sister-in-law, a competent, known estate planning attorney to go through the documents and make sure that they're up to date and consistent with the law where that person lives. It's another important step to make sure that you reduce the stress of the decline of aging parents and their final days, because those things are often very specific in the estate plan, and you need to know what's up if you want to help them. So I think the final thing to know about these points is that you really have to have a family meeting. If you've got siblings and they don't get along or somebody doesn't care, fine. They don't have to be included. But the people who are willing should be willing to get together. And someone has to be the leader. Maybe that's you. Maybe you're watching this YouTube video because that's you. You're the one that's going to take responsibility. And most of the time we find at agingparents.com, it's the daughter or the daughter-in-law, or if there are no girls, it's the most responsible son or son-in-law. So call that family meeting, sit down, talk about all these things, have more than one family meeting. This is just not the talk, as some people write about. That annoys me because you can't cover all this in a talk. This is a long process. It might take a number of weeks. Very important to be sure that your aging loved one is in a good mood, in a good place. They didn't just lose their best friend. They didn't just have a diagnosis that is uncomfortable and making them sad or fearful. You want to do it when they're in a good place. You don't want to do it at a family meeting, gathering for a holiday. That's not a good time. Pick something that you think is going to work for them. Not putting yourself first, putting them first. And I think you have a good chance of success. This document called Help Aging Parents Checklist is available to you free. At the bottom of the screen here, there is a link to sign up for our agingparents.com quick tips, case studies, newsletter. And when you sign up for that, you will get your free checklist going through all of these things. And you can take this to the family meeting or use it as a guide or a discussion to at least get started with all this. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye from agingparents.com.